So let me go ahead and introduce our special guest, but everybody had an opening, so I want our special guest to give out the information, how people can reach him, and then we'll jump on in here and the conversation continue from this morning, because there was a question that came on from the radio side that I want to dive into. But let me go ahead and introduce Michael Imhotep, historian and national political commentator. Michael Imhotep, host of the African History Network show and founder of the African History Network. He's also a weekly panelist on Roland Martin's Unfiltered daily digital show, which I was with Brother Roland Martin last week in Chicago, Chicago for the rally for Sonia Massey's family there. Brother Michael Imhotep, great to see you. Well, I heard you this morning. Good to see you. Good to see you, my brother. You're looking sharp, fine.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you this morning. We'll jump into it, but I want you to, let people know how they can reach you, and any, brief opening statement that you, since everybody had a little brief opening statement, anything that you would like to add before we jump into our conversation.
Well, Brother Fatim Muhammad, thanks for having me on. And I've watched over the years Open Line, and thanks for also having me guest co-host, assisting and helping me guest co-host Reverend Sharpton's radio show also a couple of years ago as well. So people can visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. At the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. So I have videos on our social media platforms like the African History Network Facebook fan page. I also teach online history classes on the weekend. I have one today, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So when people go to our website, they can register for that, because this is a multi-week online history course that I teach. And also I'll be doing the African History Network show tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our guest is going to be Reese Colbert, who they watch Roland Martin Unfiltered. They see her there. They see her on Sirius XM. And we're going to discuss a lot of the disinformation that has been put out about Vice President Kamala Harris, et cetera, and go through and do some fact checking on this. So it's a busy Sunday, brother. So I've got 3 interviews scheduled today.
There you go. And I just want to say thank you for joining us here. And let me talk, briefly what Larry said about preventive medicine. You got to realize that we brought on some of the top doctors across the country when COVID was out. And we brought them on, and one of the doctors that we knew right in our backyard, Dr. Chris Purnell, is one of those preventive medicine folks. It's ironic, because I had COVID maybe 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, it was the second bout with it. It was, for me, I'm vaxxed and, boosted up. Some believe, some don't. I'm not here to do that. Our job was to put out information and let people decide what they wanted to do during that time. But what happens now is that COVID is not being monitored or being tracked. And I just stayed on top, because I noticed when I have a cold, my cold lasts me a week and a half. And then 3rd day, that cold started to get better. I was like, and I had the test here, and I test myself. So I've been in touch with Dr. Garg this week, and he was supposed to come on this morning, but he did overnights last night. And then Wednesday night, this coming Wednesday, he is traveling to Michigan, but we are in constant contact, because a lot of people are coming up with stomach viruses and colds and not testing. And they having COVID, and they're walking around. So I knew I had COVID. So I just stayed here, in the house, because I'll be honest with you, it's hard to put the mask back on, unless I really, really have to. I'm all well prepared. I got the other mask with this here, just in case something else breaks out down, wherever I'm at.
Well,
but with
before Brother Imhotep expands our knowledge, let me just say we have to always acknowledge our allies. And Michael Bloomberg made a $600 million donation to 4 Black medical schools, $175 million to each medical school. Those schools overwhelmingly produce the highest number of Black doctors in this country. Between Black people are roughly 12 to 13% of our population, but only 6% of the nation's doctors are Black. And so I think we need to focus on that, which we have, Patine, over the years on the show. but I think we have to emphasize how important it is to give opportunities to those who are pursuing careers in medicine and may not have the means to do so. This affords them a way to pursue their careers as doctors. And we look at it, Fatim, from the perspective of how many times have we gone to a doctor? How many times have we gone into a medical facility and you barely see a Black doctor, right? And so this is so important. And as a HBCU alum, Sabrina and I, we often talk about the lack of funding, right? The lack of the low endowments. As I said last week, Howard University's endowment is $865 million. Harvard University's endowment is $50 billion. And so that donation of $600 million, Fatim, we can't understate how important that was. And so certainly kudos to Michael Bloomberg.
Exactly. And the New York City Department of Health is tracking the COVID expansion, the rise, and particularly in Black neighborhoods and Latino neighborhoods, Hunts Point, South Jamaica, in terms of hospitalizations. Not you just called in and you got rid of it. Hospitalizations, Hunts Point, South Jamaica, East New York, Central Harlem, Co-op City. That's where it's rising. And Nassau County doesn't want you to wear a mask either. And so they just passed legislation making it against the law for you to wear a mask in public spaces.
Crazy. Last week, they passed that law last week.
So COVID is here, people.
Oh, yeah.
It is here. And it's being tracked.
Well, no, not tracked there in New York, but it's not tracked across the country. CDC,
no, I don't know.
CDC is not, they're not tracking it. They're not tracking it.
But here in New York, absolutely.
There you go. And that's good, So, all right, let's go ahead and jump on in here. We had a question this morning, and, there's a lot of politics here to discuss. We've been on point. We've had our strong debates on this, and it's not about going back because we don't have to prove a point, because we all knew that we needed to move forward. Larry always said we got to keep Trump out of the White House. The bottom line is, a lot of us felt that, we standing with President Biden because that was the alternative that was there. But we also knew that their motivation wasn't there. The donors was pulling out, and we are past that. We're moving forward. So we don't need to rehash that. But now we are seeing a whole different momentum. But with that momentum and the enthusiasm, that's beautiful, is good, is no but. However, we have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of political education is still needed within our communities here. Really needed in our communities. And Brother Michael Imhotep, I want to go to the Electoral College, but there's one thing I just want to briefly say, that you were talking about the doctors and the funding of Michael Bloomberg real quick. Let me just say this, and Sabrina talking about more Black doctors. You guys know I'm a sickle cell advocate. My wife passed on sickle cell, but being her advocate for years. And I'll tell you straight up, I've had some good Black doctors, had some good white doctors. I had some pain in the ass white doctors, and I have a pain in the ass Asian and Black doctors. So I want doctors that are compassionate and not judgmental, and not looking and diagnosing their patients like they're in a textbook. You understand? For instance, sickle cell, with next month is Sickle Cell Awareness Month, which we'll get more into that. You can't do it with a textbook. Somebody who has a high hemoglobin still can be in a sickle cell crisis. So bedside manners is important, but there got to be some compassion. Dr. Ian Smith, who's been a guest on this show before, talked about how some people, especially those that suffer with pain, with sickle cell and other things, how they're mismanaged when it comes down to pain management. Right now, there's people out here that is suffering in pain because doctors are scared to prescribe opioids to treat. They have a chronic illness that causes pain. Pain management will tell you, you have to manage the pain. And if there's an addiction rate, the addiction rate is very small. I spoke on this with pain management at Long Island College Hospital some years ago about that. So again, yes, more Black doctors are needed, but we need more good doctors out there that is going to be compassionate out there, because I'm telling you, it's an uphill battle when it comes to health, and especially in the Black and Latino and other people of color's community out here. So just want to add that with that being said. Now we get back to the political page, and let's go to Brother Michael Imhotep to talk a little bit about the Electoral College, because we had a caller this morning and I said that we will dive into that and then we'll get into the presidential politics of the day.
Okay, so we'll talk about Electoral College, but when I finish that, I got to talk about what you just talked about, dealing with pain and pain medication being prescribed to African Americans.
Why don't you start there first? Start there. Yeah, start there.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's historical, dating back to slavery, because during slavery there was stereotypes of African Americans saying that we had higher thresholds of pain. Okay, and that continued after slavery. And when we look at a reluctance from some doctors to prescribe opioids to African Americans, even blackdoctor.org had an article a few years ago that talked about how you had a high percentage of medical school students who thought that African Americans had higher pain thresholds. Okay, number one. Number two, if everybody researches this article from February 8th, 1914 from the New York Times, it's called "Negro Cocaine Fiends Are a New Southern Menace. Murder and insanity increasing among lower class blacks because they have taken to sniffing since deprived of whiskey by prohibition." This is a huge article from the New York Times, February 8th, 1914. And it dealt with the fear that many white people had of what happens when black men get high on cocaine. They said that African American men had superhuman strength when they were high on cocaine. And they were asking the question, do police officers now need to carry a .45 caliber handgun because a .38 wasn't powerful enough to kill a Negro high on cocaine? Because cocaine was illegal. Okay. So when we go back in history, we see this when we look at why marijuana was made illegal, largely because of the marijuana prohibition tax in 1937. That was pushed by Harry J. Anslinger. And when he testified in front of Congress, he said that white women craved black men sexually when white women were high on marijuana, because marijuana was legal. So when we go back and look at the drug laws in this country, historically changed. As long as white people were using the drugs, it wasn't a problem. 1875, you have the first anti-drug law in the history of this country. That was the anti-opium law in California, specifically San Francisco. And that was targeting Chinese male working on the railroads. And they were saying, oh, well, these men are going to seduce white women and things like this, right? So there's a history behind this, but we have to have more competent doctors, period, but especially culturally competent African-American doctors also.
Yes. Culturally,
yeah. Yes. Okay, so when we look at the Electoral College, the Electoral College was created by the U.S. Constitution at the Philadelphia Convention, 1787. Okay, very briefly here, I encourage people. I'm going to give a couple articles for people to read for resources. Number one, there was a good piece from CBSNews.com that came out January 19th, 2021. This is the day before the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It's called "Most Americans Don't Know What's in the Constitution, a Crisis of Civic Education." And the way it works there, there are 538 electoral college votes. Okay, you become president-elect by winning by getting to at least 270 electoral college votes, okay, which is 50% plus one. You win the electoral college votes. You become president-elect by winning the electoral college votes associated with a state, okay? Each state has at least 3 electoral college votes. I think that's the number, at least 3. You win the electoral college votes associated with a state by winning the popular vote in the state. And this is what confuses people. So the caller on the show today said Hillary Clinton got more popular votes, but they gave it to Donald Trump. No, they didn't give it to Donald Trump. Donald Trump got 306 electoral college votes because he won Michigan. He won the popular vote in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. He won Michigan by 10,704 votes. I live in Michigan. I saw it happen. Okay. He won Michigan by 0.2 of a percentage point, and he won the 16 electoral college votes associated with Michigan. So, and the electoral college does not vote until the first Monday following the second Wednesday in December. You become president-elect by winning the popular vote in the state and getting those electoral college votes. So when I hear people say the popular vote doesn't matter, no, it's not it's not the national popular vote. And there's really no national election. You really have 50 individual state elections because states have different rules to the election. Okay. You really have 50 individual state elections, number one. Number two, we have to, Republicans have always been better at that ground game and understanding the laws. And their goal is not to get more people to vote generally, it's to get less people to vote. This is why they engage in disinformation. Okay, but they understand how the Electoral College works. It's not because Republicans created the Electoral College, because in 1787, you didn't have a Democratic Party or Republican Party. They just studied the rules better. They study the laws better. Okay, so we have to understand this now. So the U.S. Census is important for people to understand how this is connected. The U.S. Census is connected to the Electoral College vote. Why? Because the census was created by the U.S. Constitution, the first census taken in 1790, and the census determines how many seats in the House of Representatives a state has. It's based upon population. Each House district is approximately 710,000, represents 710,000 people. Okay, you take the number of seats in the House of Representatives a state has. You add to it the number of U.S. senators a state has. Every state has 2 U.S. senators based upon the Constitution, and that tells you how many electoral college votes are associated with a state. So it's tied to population. So with the 2020 census, Michigan lost a electoral college vote. We went from 16 to 15 because of a shrinking population. When Donald Trump said that he wanted to put an immigration question on the U.S. Census, I knew exactly what he was doing because there hasn't been an immigration question on a census in about 70 years. The census is designed to count every person in the country, regardless of their status, whether they're documented or undocumented. Okay, what he was trying to do is to weaken blue-leaning states. Some of them sanctuary states, things like this, more open, or have sanctuary cities more open to undocumented immigrants, to weaken them when it comes to the Electoral College, okay? Because a lot of those people who may be here undocumented, or they may be in a mixed house. They may be in a house where some people are documented and other people are undocumented. They're less likely to return the census form. New York lost a Electoral College seat or Electoral College vote. And if 89 more people had responded to the census, they would have maintained it. Okay. So that weakens New York, weakens Michigan when it comes to the Electoral College vote. So Republicans are playing the long game. I was taught to understand the rules of the game, the rules of engagement. Okay. And so that's why when I teach about political self-defense, we get deeper into this than just voting. We need more than just voter education. We need to understand how to play the game of politics to win. And economics is part of that. My degree's in business administration. I totally agree with that. I taught entrepreneurship for 7 years. But laws and policies impact and govern your economic empowerment. If you don't believe me, ask the Fearless Fund. Who a federal judge, a panel of 3 federal judges, 2 appointed by Donald Trump, ruled against them in the lawsuit that conservative activist Ed Bloom filed against them. And when we talked to 2 of the founders on Roland Martin Unfiltered, their fund is not exclusively for African-American women, it's for women of color. Right. Ed Bloom is saying, oh, it's for Black women. No, it's not exclusively for Black women. They give it to women of different ethnicities. But this is a whole attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is the conservative-leaning Supreme Court that Donald Trump put in place, and people didn't see this coming. For life. For life. These are lifetime appointments. And Project 2025 is the second part of this. Okay? And people think, oh, 920 pages, that's far-fetched. No, it's not, because the Heritage Foundation did the same thing in 1980. That book was called Mandate for Leadership in 1980. The Heritage Foundation put out a book in 1980 that contained 2,000 right-leaning policies they wanted the Reagan administration to adopt. And according to Project 2025, the Reagan administration adopted 64% of those policies in Reagan's first term. The reason why they're doing it again is because it worked the first time. But now we have social media. Now we have Taraji P. Henson. Okay, now we have WBLS. Okay, so it's not working the way they thought it was going to work. It's being exposed. That's why Donald Trump is trying to back away from it. But evidence keeps coming up with him on a plane in 2022 with Kevin Roberts, okay, the president of the Heritage Foundation. So that's just a brief nutshell of how the Electoral College works.
And so important, Brother Michael. And this is why, you know, Sabrina says on here, but today is one of the most important days. All our shows are here important, but today is a very important to click, like, and share this program because it's about education. Sometimes we have conversations, sometimes we have debate, but we also have to have education, especially in this time. We want to give you information out there because a lot of people communicate with other people, especially through social media, and there's misinformation and disinformation that is going out there, and we need to have the correct information. With that being said, let's have a go around with our team. So when I come to you, so I'm going to start with you, Jamie, Sabrina, and then Larry. Jamie?
Yes, and to just expand on what Brother Imhotep said, this is why right now in Georgia and in other states, Arizona, there are cases across this country that have the Republicans, Donald Trump among them, in legal wrangling simply because they tried to use the electors, fake electors. So as Imhotep said, although, and this is why I have from the mountaintop talked about for many, many years on this show, the importance of state legislatures and the importance of the courts. Yes. The Republicans have a 3-decade campaign, right? And it really began in earnest after Barack Obama was elected for his first term. And they played the long game, very strategic in seizing state legislatures and state courts and federal courts. And they have been successful, which is why, as Imhotep said, you have the Fearless Fund case, and you have so many others. And Edward Bloom isn't new to this game. He's been doing this for decades. It began in Texas when he tried to suppress and oppress the Agency of Latinos. Mm-hmm. And so he's been a lifelong right-wing activist. And so we do have to understand that all politics are local. And we have to look at the states and how what the states are able to do in its federalism affects the federal and, right, and even the local. And I'm talking about, we look at just your own district with gerrymandering that took place. The Democrats lost the House because of redistricting in New York State, which backfired on the Democrats. They have to be held accountable for that. And so the Electoral College, it truly isn't representative because a state like Montana that has only a fraction of the population of a state like California should not have the same number of senators, in my opinion, right? Or representation, but that's another story. And so we do look at how the census plays a role, a very critical role, and how we have to understand if we do not look at who our Secretary of State is. Walter Mosley is the Secretary of State in New York. Taisha Way, who's also the Lieutenant Governor of New Jersey, is the Secretary of State. How important the Secretary of State's role is in certifying these elections and making sure that these elections, whoever wins, you can contest an election. We saw Al Gore contest the election, but it's done in a manner that is fair, that is transparent, and that is not nefarious, which Donald Trump and Republicans are doing, have done, and will continue to do. They're already setting the stage for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's victory. They're setting the stage to claim that the elections were rigged, that the elections were invalid, and they are continuing to rally state electors and the state secretaries of state to contest these elections. And so we have to play this game and fight this game on multiple fronts. And Fatine, let me just go back because I think, not to digress, but Imhotep made a great point regarding pain, and I don't want to digress too much. But we all know J. Mariam Sims and what he did from 1845 to 1849 and performing, right, operations and experimental operations on Black women slaves. And so my doctor, you're right, Fatim, we want compassionate doctors. My primary care physician, who I've had for decades, is Jewish, a wonderful man, right? He's ending his practice, but a wonderful man. You go to those who are going to serve you competently and with compassion. You're absolutely right. So I just want to qualify that. But we must also, Michael, take a look at right now how the Republicans, they don't really have a way, in a definitive way, to counter the momentum right now of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So what they're doing is they're engaging in ad hominem attacks. They're not putting forth any policy that a majority of the Americans, right, subscribe to. If you look at the polls, most Americans want the Affordable Care Act to remain in place. Trump has already vowed, even though they have lost in court at every turn, to overturn the Affordable Care Act, right? When we look at, Michael, you talked about this morning on the radio show, student loan forgiveness, right? Most Americans are in favor of student loan forgiveness of some form, right? Most Americans are in favor of women have dominion over their own bodies, reproductive rights. So this is not a one issue campaign. This is not a monolithic when it comes to Blacks and Latinos, Asians, white folks. We are all, most of us, multiple issue voters. But what the Republicans continue to capitalize on is that most voters are low information voters. They don't dig too much into the policy like we do. We're policy monks, we look deep into it. So they give sound bites. They give, very vague, policy points, but what they are talking points. And so our job and our duty is to, as we do here, Michael, as you do, and many others, to inform voters, right? To educate voters. It is why books are being banned in schools. They do not want civics. They do not want an intellectual and highly informed electorate. They want people to remain ignorant. Because if you have majority, and when I say ignorant, meaning not knowing, if you have a majority of the electorate that truly doesn't know the positions of the candidates on economic issues, on social issues, then it becomes more of a optic, right, election, and who presents, who inspires, who seems to be the person who cares the most, who seems to be the person that's going to fight for us. Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about poor Blacks or poor whites. Donald Trump only cares about himself and how everyone is useful idiots or tools and vehicles to his own personal means and agenda. And so we have to remember that. And I do think that thus far, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have done a great job. And Kamala Harris's team has done a great job. If we go back to 2019 when she was first running, up until now, her experience as a vice president, and Michael, you made a point, it's important for her not to undermine, right, Biden's policies right now, but she does have to distinguish herself. And that's tough. That's tough to do. But I think thus far, and she's going to release her economic plan next week, I think that thus far she has done a great balancing act in not undermining Biden, particularly on the Netanyahu-Hamas war. It's not Palestine and Israel. This is Netanyahu versus Hamas and other issues that can distinguish herself without being presented as being radical, as being presented as someone who is countering or going against Biden, because they're tying her to Biden. But as you said this morning, Mike, I'll leave it at this. Vice presidents don't make policy, right? They don't. Normally they do go along with the president because that's their job. Nevertheless, now that she's running and she still is the vice president and she still is essentially working for Biden, she has to make sure that she is very nuanced and very careful in terms of how she's presenting her vision and her future of what she sees as a future of this country.
Right. I mean, I'm let you respond that, Michael. I just want to say one thing to Jamie. It's not a correction. It's just that I do know what you're saying about the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, with his war against Hamas. Unfortunately, it's a war on the Palestinian people, as Larry has said, a genocidal war. You just saw what happened with the bombing yesterday. So this is and I couldn't, for our Palestinian brothers and sisters that are on this here, or people that are sympathizers or empathizers with those folks, is that we understand and we see, and we've been saying it. Ceasefire. So many people, what happened on October 7th, we said was wrong. We said that. We don't have to keep saying that. Understand? To balance this. But the number of Palestinian people that have died, there's no discussion on that no more. There's no discussion on that no more. There's no discussion. That is wrong. And that is a war, a genocidal war on the people, because you want their land and you want other things. You're bombing. There's nothing else to bomb but the people now. There's hardly any infrastructure there now. With that being said, James said a lot.
But again, this is Netanyahu.
I got that. That's why I said I didn't want to counter you. But let's be real. It is a war on the Palestinian people.
No, of course, on the Palestinian people being waged by Netanyahu, but you have innocent Palestinians and innocent Israelis that are dying as a result of Netanyahu's genocidal campaign and Hamas's ill-fated attack on Israel on October 7th.
Right. And again, I'm a realist. I know Sabrina says she don't like no violence. Unfortunately, it's a violent world. Since it has been, and it will be. And, I understand, like she says, she says it very well. She don't support violence anywhere. And I respect that. Fortunately, this is a violent world. And when people attack, nobody stood up for those Palestinian people. Nobody hardly stood up for those Palestinian people. Hamas came in and wanted to run the government. And it comes a time when people are trampled on and you back people into a corner and they come out fighting. And how they come out fighting, then you look at, that's wrong. But when you do what you do to a people, eventually they're going to come out fighting. A lot of y'all are Christians or believers of the scriptures, and you see there's wars and wars in the Bible. With that being said, let me get Michael in, and just so I can get Sabrina and Brother Larry, and I'll let you respond because Jamie said a lot. Jamie was right on point on a lot of things. But Brother Michael, do you want to respond to anything that Jamie said?
Well, yeah, I wanted to comment not on Israel Hamas, but dealing with the attack on voting rights and putting this into historical context. When you talked about President Obama being reelected 2012, the percentage of African Americans who voted was 66.7%, if I remember correctly, of those registered to vote. This was the first presidential election where the percentage of registered African American voters was higher than the percentage of white people who registered to vote who actually voted, and this scared a lot of Republicans. This scared a lot of them. They came back and attacked us with Shelby County versus Holder, U.S. Supreme Court case of 2013. And this is what people don't understand, which attacked Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The reason why you needed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is because of what happened in Mississippi in 1890 with the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, where they rewrote the state constitution. They passed poll taxes and literacy tests to suppress the African American vote. And African Americans were the majority of the population in Mississippi. Okay. And Solomon Saladin Calhoun, who was the white county judge who presided over the convention, he said, we came here to exclude the Negro. They said explicitly why they were there. Okay. Because 2,000 African American men got elected to the state legislature. You had a handful of them in Congress, about 20 in Congress. And you have a couple in the Senate. And we were elected to local office during Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877. So after the Compromise of 1877, which ended Reconstruction, you have a backlash to all of that, and you have the white supremacists and the Democratic Party at the time taking back control of the state legislatures, rewriting the state constitutions. 1895 South Carolina, 1898 Alabama, 1898 you have Louisiana, and they imposed the grandfather clause. 1901 Alabama. Okay, so the reason why you needed the 1965 Voting Rights Act is to remove the impediments, the obstacles to the 15th Amendment of 1870, which guaranteed the right to vote to African American men. Then we know the 19th Amendment of 1920 protected the right to vote for women. Okay, specifically white women, but for women. So Section 5 dealt with the pre-clearance. Okay, and what happened was with the pre-clearance in 1965, it stated that counties and states that had a history of putting obstacles to the 15th Amendment in place, they had to get permission from a federal judge to make any changes to any laws, any changes to the location of polling places, the times that polls open and close, how early you can have early voting, all different types of things like that. When it was gutted by the Supreme Court, Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama cheered it. Shelby County is in Alabama. Alabama was ground zero for the fight for the Voting Rights Act, the Selma to Montgomery March. Okay, that's where you have Bloody Sunday, March 7th, 1965. Okay, so as a result of Shelby County versus Holder, in 2016, there were 868 fewer polling places. And the majority of those polling places that were closed were in areas that have high African-American and Latino populations. Okay, in 2020, there were approximately 1,700 fewer polling places as a result of Shelby County versus Holder. The attack we saw in the state legislatures, going back to Senate Bill 201, that started coming out of Georgia, right? Pushing the big lie. That was refuted, pushing the big lie that the election was stolen by Donald Trump. Senate Bill 201 was crafted by Heritage Action for America, which is the sister organization to the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation is the organization that wrote Project 2025, called Mandate for Leadership, but they wrote Mandate for Leadership in 1980 also. So there's a good article from motherjones.com that Ari Berman wrote, Ari Berman and Nick Sergey. And Ari Berman did a series of articles for thenation.com during the 2016 presidential election dealing with voter suppression. The name of this article, Leaked Video, Dark Money Group brags about writing GOP voter suppression bills across the country. Now, this is from May 13th, 2021. And I put the link here in the chat. So if you put this on social media platforms also. Jessica Anderson is the executive director of Heritage Action for America, the sister organization to the Heritage Foundation. And she was caught on video talking about how it was that organization that crafted Senate Bill 201 and copycat bills in other state legislatures. They're the ones behind that. So you have the Heritage Foundation that's submitting lists of ultra-conservative judges for the federal bench and Supreme Court so that they can interpret law for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And then you have Heritage Action for America that is passing laws, crafting laws and getting them passed to suppress people's ability to vote in the present. So they're boxing us in. And then you have right-wing organizations like Moms Against Liberty who are getting book bans put in place to reduce people's ability to understand the past at the same time. Okay. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So this is political war that's taking place right now. So we have to understand these different forces here. And I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but sure as hell ain't stupid. I can see who keeps passing these laws and who keeps advocating for these laws that are detrimental for us. And I can see who keeps voting against these laws and keeps largely putting laws in pass that are beneficial to us. So this we have to understand political self-defense, and this is about power acquisition. Okay, so we have to get beyond. I know people mean well when they say this, but we have to get beyond telling African Americans to exercise your right to vote. You vote for power, and you have to be able to. It's not just about what a politician can do for you. It's also understanding how to block and stop what people are trying to do to you, because this is about self-preservation.
And as you said, the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, Moms Against Liberty, they are all, let's not forget, we talk about economic empowerment, extremely well funded.
Yes. Well funded. Let me just say this, Sabrina, I'm bringing you in. I'm not going long. This is the problem. And I see, especially on my other podcast, and, when folks come on and they, and talk similar to Candace Owens, South Carolina, the Senator Tim Scott, Larry Elder, Representative Brian Donaldson from Florida. And, you know, when they say there's no systemic racism, this is what we talk about, systemic racism. And then these folks come on and then they say, well, I'm not voting for the Democratic Party. And it's not about pushing the Democratic Party, but like you said, you're not stupid. We got to work with those that are good, willing to work with us. We know that the Donald Trump campaign is not going to work with us or for us. They use us as tokens, token blacks that come out to talk about this. Brother Michael Imhotep just broke some things down. Again, click and share, click and share, click and share. Let me go to Sabrina. Sabrina, floor is yours, my sister.
To your point, Michael Imhotep, is that the GOP, for people who say, you know, I'm not going to vote, well, GOP says, great.
Yes.
They're trying to keep the voting participation as low as possible, okay? And they have filed lawsuits in 20 states, 20, to stop, to make it inconvenient to move the voting precinct, to stop mail-in ballots, all of that. And particularly in those states that have what? High electoral votes. All right. So participate in your own demise, because I've often said is that you have to look at, and systems look at that small electoral block. If you live at 555 Main Street, they know how many people turn out for the election.
Right.
They know exactly who participates and who not. So when you're getting delays in services or being ignored for generations, economically and every other way, because we can see whether you are engaged, you are leveraging your power to vote. I would love, because you are in Michigan, to hear from you a temperature check, because the last election, Hill Harper was running for Senate. 22, according to Genesee County stats, 22% of that county turned out to vote. I look at, we opened the show honoring the memory of Michael Brown and his parents and how they're carrying the tragedy of that. The new elected congressperson, Wesley Bell, you know, would not file charges against the cop that killed this child in the streets and left his body for 4 hours. I look at the Bronx, how generationally have zero access to economic, equitable financial services, peel that back and look at poverty and lack of access. So I would like to go back to Michigan, where you are, sir, and share with us, what are you feeling on the ground? I'm part of these you know, mobilizations online, but the people in Flint, the last stat that I saw was maybe about an 8-9% turnout vote. And when we're talking about, well, we got to register the people to vote, I'm looking at where are the maps and there are maps of where there is economic trauma. Those people for generations. And then I also look at, and I'm so glad that Vice President Harris did turn, I like this last response when she was in Arizona, to, you know, those who want the war to end in Gaza. I'm one of them. And I like how she responded to them, that their voices matter. So put all those, I took you to Detroit, to the Bronx, to St. Louis, Arizona, and now I'm back to you. I would love for you to thread all of that, because that's where the people need to be incentivized, not the ones that we're high knowledge people. You know, Donald Trump says, I love the low information voters.
Right.
Talk to us.
Yeah, so there's I live in Detroit, and there's a energy in Detroit that's happened since July 21st, and there's mobilization taking place. It's going to continue. The campaign's only 21 days old, so it's going to continue. There has to be, and I think that there's going to be a good information campaign to explain to people how policy impacts their daily lives and how the policies of the Biden and Harris administration have helped here in Detroit. For instance, there's a Detroit, our police chief, James White, just released the stats, and there has been a significant decrease in certain types of violent crimes here in Detroit that's documented. And we've seen this trend take place over the past couple of years. And it's not perfect. Doesn't mean that crime doesn't happen in Detroit, but we have seen a decrease. And one of the major factors has been the community violence intervention groups. Okay, whether it's Detroit 300, whether it's Brother Zeke and his organization, things of this nature. Well, there's a program called Force Detroit, and it funds these different organizations. I think it's about 6 organizations. There have been recent news articles written about it here. In Detroit. It funds these different organizations to be able to go out and intervene and keep violence from happening. Well, that program is being funded by $10 million that came from the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that no Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for. So here we see a policy in Washington, D.C., a city that many people haven't visited. And you get to see the impact that, like, this one policy is having on the ground. When we look at, for instance, 2.6 million jobs created for African Americans. We saw the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans in April of 2023, is 4.8%. Okay, that has an impact. It's not perfect. Okay, but you're moving in a better direction. So one of the things that has to happen in the education, because it's important to educate people on policies as opposed to just voting for a Democrat or Republican.
Right.
Talk about the policies and how they impact people's lives. You look at the student loan forgiveness that has happened, okay, for about 5 million people, over $160 billion. That's monumental, because I know people who've had their student loans forgiven because of that. Republicans overwhelmingly are against student loan forgiveness.
Now, they're still trying to block it. They're still trying to block it.
Not only were they still trying to block it, there were 5 senators, including Senator Mitt Romney, who tried to get a bill passed in the Senate to strip President Biden of the ability to forgive student loans. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, they didn't have a problem forgiving paycheck protection loans. Mm-hmm. And some people got loans forgiven for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some mm-hmm. of them were in Congress. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about forgiving a loan of $20,000, now it's a problem. Mm-hmm. Okay? With the inflationary costs that have happened with the cost of a 4-year degree. Okay, so when we look at $16 billion for HBCUs since 2021, that's a record amount of funding that has come from the Biden-Harris administration. Even though Donald Trump wants to take credit for Representative Alma Adams' bill, the Future Act, member of the Congressional Black Caucus, you know, he wants to take credit for her bill. The record number of funding has come from the Biden-Harris administration. So it's about connecting, explaining to people how this policy in Washington, D.C. impacts you here on the ground. And then elections are about a contrast. It's binary. Now, you explain to me every question people have about Vice President Kamala Harris. I say, you got to ask that same question about Donald Trump. Show me Donald Trump's policies. Okay, absolutely. I'm not saying you're not saying that, but I'm just saying, because you have people say, "Oh, well, I don't like this that she did. I don't like this that she said, so I'm not voting." No. Biden said, "Don't compare me to perfection. Don't compare me to the Almighty. Compare me to the alternative." Mm-hmm. Okay, the alternative is Donald Trump and his policies, and all you got to do is look at what happened when he was in office. There were 3 government shutdowns in the first 2 years of the Trump-Pence administration,
and he told you to drink bleach. Got it. Speak to the people in Flint that are still suffering from the effects of that water. It has nothing to do with VP Harris or President Biden, but speak to them, as well as the Muslim community in Michigan. You're in Detroit. What are you hearing, particularly with her speaking to the protesters? And actually, she did have a one-on-one with some of those, because it's a major issue. Even though it was an 18% jump in the young voters who said that they would like to support her, it's tied to the genocide in Gaza. Would you talk about that? And also, are you citing in your public appearances the poll from Howard University? Because these other polls, they need to include how many Black people they talk to, because usually it's none. I want to know how many Black people, because according to Howard University poll, is 93% of those 1,900 Black people that they polled said that we're voting for Harris. So what are your thoughts to the Flint community and the Muslim community in Michigan and all throughout this country?
With Flint, I'm not sure of the impact that the infrastructure bill has had on Flint yet. But I think part of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that only 19 Republicans in the Senate and 13 in the House voted for, part of that is dealing with removing lead pipes across the country. Because there were, when the Flint water crisis happened, and we heard about it here in Detroit before it made the national news, when the Flint water crisis happened, a study came out and found that there were 3,000 communities across the country that had higher lead levels in the water than Flint, Michigan. Okay. And Flint has been the victim of disinvestment for decades. And then we know that they were also taken over by the governor as well. You had the city council and mayor stripped of power. So I have to look at where they are in getting the pipes replaced. I know there was some replacement taking place before the infrastructure bill. That should escalate that, okay? And that's needed across the country. Here, the Muslim community here in Detroit, I haven't spoken to them directly. I've spoken more to generally the African-American community. You do have, Vice President Kamala Harris did meet with one of the non-committal groups. But even when the primary was here a few months ago here in Detroit, you had some of them saying that even though they were voting non-committal, they were still voting for Biden in the general election because they knew Biden was a lot better than Trump. Okay. So what has to happen? This is a complicated issue that deals with a lot of history. Okay. And my views may be a little different than some people, but one thing I would say is you're dealing with a complicated issue, and Netanyahu does not want a ceasefire because Netanyahu's polls, his popularity is very low in Israel, and he knows if the war ends, he's going to be out. So it's not in his best interest to have a ceasefire. On the other side, Hamas is the government. Some people refer to them as a terrorist organization. Hamas should be separated. Hamas, I don't look at Hamas and the Palestinian people as the same. Okay, right. Because the Palestinians are being victimized, and on the other end, the U.S. has been trying to, and I don't agree with all U.S. policy, especially in international affairs and in some domestic affairs as well. But they have been trying to negotiate this ceasefire, but you have more than one party, and you're trying to negotiate a ceasefire with Hamas, the government that hasn't had elections in over 20 years, and Netanyahu and his cabinet as well. So people have to, and I've talked to people on both sides. I've talked to a few Muslims who've had family members killed in Palestine, and I've talked to at least two Jewish people who have family members in Israel. Okay. This is going to get worse if Donald Trump becomes president again. Donald Trump has already said he's going to remove all humanitarian aid from.
It's already done. It's already happening.
And Michael, let's not forget. Michael,
that's already done. That's happening now.
Let's not forget. The only reason Hamas existed and had the power it did because Netanyahu did not want the Palestinian Authority to be the ruling government in Gaza because they were pushing for a two-state solution. Yeah. So he really buttressed and empowered Hamas and was allowing hundreds of millions of dollars to come into Gaza via Qatar, right? And with that money, they were able to remain in power while he suppressed the Palestinian Authority. So October 7th really is a direct result of Netanyahu buttressing and supporting the power of the Hamas government, not the military wing per se, but essentially they are one and the same. As you said, you separate Hamas from the Palestinian people. That attack only occurred because Netanyahu is the sole individual that kept Hamas in power in Gaza.
Yeah, and there's an article from Times of Israel that talks about that. I'm not an advocate for the publication Times of Israel, but when I was doing my research on this, I did shortly about a week after the October 7th attack, I interviewed Abayomi Ezekwe, editor of the Pan-African Newswire, on my show. We got deep into this history. So, and then Netanyahu wants Trump back in office. Now, it's also important to understand that Donald Trump imposed a ban on Muslims coming to the country from 7 Muslim countries. Okay. And when he did that, that also increased anti-Muslim sentiment in this country.
Right.
So this is a complicated issue. I think there should be some type of ceasefire. I don't have all the details of what that may look like. It may look like something different than I envision. Hamas has to return the hostages, but also Israel has to release the 6,000 Palestinians that they're holding. And most of them haven't had trials, things of this nature.
Right.
So this is one of the things that Hamas is trying to do, trying to get back those 6,000 Palestinians. And oftentimes when this is talked about in the media, the 6,000 Palestinians that Israel is holding is not talked about. This is why I had a real problem with mainstream media, including MSNBC, like the first few days that this happened, because they didn't deal with really any background history on what caused the October 7th attack. And I'm not saying that the way the attack went down or what happened was right or what hey, these people have been fighting for a long time. Okay.
Exactly.
These people have been fighting for a long time. So
what I would say, I just want to leave it with this. I think and I understand the vice president here is still the vice president. Sure. But when she starts to lay out her foreign policy, for me, just talking for me, I want the first thing to happen is Anthony Blinken, that he's going to issue a statement that he's going to spend more time with his wife and his children, because that's always a signal that people got fired. Okay, that's the first part. And also that they address the trauma the United States government signed and sealed by Congress people, that were doing the jack in the box, standing up every 5 seconds for a war criminal, and that they include the Holocaust that's happening in the Sudan and other parts of Africa. So and when we make that shift, because as Madam Vice President is saying, and the nominee Governor Walz is saying, this is going to be a close election. We're the underdog, and you can't afford to ignore any voices and the trauma that we've been championing and cheerleading for years. That's where I would like to see the pivot, Mr. Imhotep.
Yeah, I'm going to hold it there because Larry's been very patient and it's got too long to get to him. Real quick, we need to get back on here. Dawood Walid, he is the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations Michigan chapter, which is CARE, because he came on and he talked about the sentiment of the Muslim and Arab community in Michigan right before the non-committal vote. So we need to get him back on here to give us an update on that community right there. Brother Larry, let me get you in here because I want to get to, because we talked a little briefly about that article, which I have a funny feeling they're going to try to use that conversation as a distraction about dividing the community, but it is a reality what happened to New York Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. I need to get to that article before we end this program today. Let me get Brother Larry in. Thank you for your patience, Larry.
Well, this has been an amazing discussion and quite enlightening, particularly the amount of detail our guest, Brother Imhotep, have given us, and the penetrating questions that have been asked by Jamie and Sabrina. Donald Trump must be defeated. That's where I always start, because if you have a good anchor, then it helps you to build a logical argument and good strategy and tactics. And why must Donald Trump be defeated? Because he is the titular leader of a fascist movement in this country that's seeking to literally overturn democracy and establish some type of white minority rule. Some people say white Christian nationalists. Other people have other versions, but in essence, they want to establish a dictatorship of a type. I mean, and they speak of this openly. I mean, Trump says, you know, I'll be a dictator on the first day. The other day, a week ago, he said, if you elect me, you won't have to worry about elections ever again. I mean, this is stuff just being said out in the open, not to mention a whole 925-page plan, which calls for the literal purging and cleansing of the civil service, to dismissing federal civil service and replace them all with Donald Trump loyalists. I mean, this is classical fascism. And a lot of people still don't want to say that word, but you hear it more and more. And you even hear it now in the mainstream discourse. So, you know, one of the things that Trump says is that the system is rigged. And he is right about that. The rigging is in the Constitution itself. The fact that we have an electoral college that actually selects the president and not the popular vote is one of the foundations of the rigging. Hillary Clinton defeated Donald Trump by 5 million votes, but Trump won the electoral college, so he becomes the president. Research has shown that Al Gore actually won the popular vote and won it in Florida. The Supreme Court stepped in, stopped the counting, and in essence awarded that election to George Bush. We need to abolish the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a remnant of slavery, literally created to give the Southern colonies more power than they actually have. This is where the whole 3/5 thing comes in. It wasn't, they didn't say literally we were 3/5 of a person. They said we would count 3/5 of the population of the slave colonies toward their overall voting population to give them more power. Yes, it's rigged. It's right there in the Constitution. So as long as we have this dichotomy between the Electoral College and the popular vote, we put ourselves in perilous circumstances to always have an election challenge. And the Electoral College should be abolished, but that is not going to happen before November 5th. To abolish the Electoral College requires a 3/4, not even a 2/3, a 3/4 majority of the states to ratify a constitutional amendment to eliminate the Electoral College. But that is something we should be raising. We should be raising it immediately after the election. We should be sending people to the next Democratic National Convention to put that in the Democratic Party national platform. You know, how does something actually become reality? There's a whole process. But we need direct election of the president. The reasons that the Electoral College were established are no longer viable. We have a fundamentally educated population. We have a registered electorate. There's no reason why we can't have direct election of the president of the United States. Kamala Harris has momentum, but this momentum can evaporate in a minute. The momentum, everyone knows the momentum, you know, is good, but we shouldn't be like resting our laurels. We should resting on our laurels. We should be having massive voter registration. Everybody knows this election was going to be close. or is going to be close? Look, it was close when a white woman was running for president, Hillary Clinton. What makes you think it's going to be less close with a woman of color? Are these people going to be any less racist when they go into the voting booth on November 5th? This thing is going to be close. We can't rest on laurels. We can't rest on the fact that there is momentum. It's a good thing, but we cannot take it for granted that victory is in the bag. It's going to be hard for a hard one, and it's going to be close in the end. And because it's going to be close, we have to understand how everything is. Look, why are there 30, I believe the number is 37 uncommitted delegates? Why are there 37 uncommitted delegates at the Democratic National Convention? Because over 700,000 people voted for them. 700,000 people could determine the outcome of the election. Michigan is one of the swing states. 100,000. There were 100,000 uncommitted voters there. Those 100,000 uncommitted voters could actually be the margin of victory and determine who's going to get those electoral delegates. So what I'm saying is the Democratic Party's foreign policy is its Achilles heel. This situation in Gaza is spiraling out of control. It's not just a war between Israel and Gaza. It's Israel versus Gaza versus Lebanon versus Syria versus Iran. They want a full-scale war with Iran. In a matter of days, the entire international situation can change if we don't get a handle on the situation in Gaza. And by getting a handle on it, I mean bringing about a permanent ceasefire. Now, how does this affect Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris has said she wants a ceasefire. Even President Biden has said he wants a ceasefire. But the problem is, this week they sent $3.5 billion more dollars to Israel for military aid and $262 million directly for munitions this week. So how can you be for a ceasefire if you continue to send weapons? You think Netanyahu is going to stop fighting? Sabrina just said an ongoing war works in his favor. And right now, people are demonstrating in Israel. Jews are demonstrating against Netanyahu because they feel he has abandoned the hostages. They have some kind of policy, correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Imhotep or Jamie or Sabrina. They have some kind of policy, I think it's called the Samson policy. And the Samson policy says the military can kill the enemy and the hostages. The people, the hostage families are demonstrating against Netanyahu because they are saying he don't give a hoot about the hostages. He wants to continue this war as long as possible. Kamala Harris met with some of the uncommitted delegates, and that's a good thing. That was one of their demands. But after the meeting, what did Kamala Harris's advisor say on Thursday? Kamala Harris's advisor said on Thursday she does not support an arms embargo against Israel. So how can you have a ceasefire if you don't support an arms embargo? You continue to send military aid. How does that end the war? How do you end the war
if Israel assassinates the chief negotiator for Hamas. And I mean, I understand what people are saying, you know, politically, that Hamas and the Palestinians are not the same. But if Hamas is not the same as the Palestinians, why are we negotiating with Hamas? We're negotiating with Hamas because they are not just the resistance, they were the elected government of Gaza. I mean, if Hamas wasn't important, we wouldn't even be talking about Hamas. If Hamas wasn't important, Israel wouldn't have assassinated Haniyeh. And they assassinated him in Iran. So I know, I understand we have to defeat Trump. At this point, the only one that can defeat Trump, that has the possible chance of defeating Trump, is the Democratic Party nominee. But I'm not going to turn off my brain simply because I want to defeat Trump. Look, the foreign policy Achilles heel of the Democratic Party could be the difference between victory and defeat. Look at Ukraine. Look at Israel. A poll came out last week, and I mentioned this on the show Wednesday night. The majority of Americans do not want U.S. troops in this war on Gaza. That's a poll. That came out the beginning of this week or the end of last week. 55% of Americans said no. We don't want no U.S. troops there. The thing is, as Sabrina pointed out, there's some U.S. troops already there. But in terms of an official, you know, presence, officially acknowledged presence, we're shipping them in mass on boats to go and on planes to go fight. That hasn't happened yet. The majority of Americans don't want that. If the situation arises, how do you think voters are going to react if Biden has announced, I'm sending U.S. troops to defend Israel? You know, that's not going to help us win. And the other thing, let me just say this before. Yeah,
because I got to get a question because I'm out of time.
Let me just say this too before we end. The foreign policy Achilles heel. In addition to the 3.5 million we sent Israel in military aid, and the 3.5 billion to 262 million, we sent $3.9 billion this week to Ukraine. Was it for military aid? No. It was for teachers' salaries, doctors' salaries, rescue workers, pensions, and social benefits. Now, as I look over the landscape of the United States, I see our teachers are not getting fair pay. I see companies no longer offering pensions. My company that I used to work for, that I get a pension for, they don't offer pensions anymore. And you need a 401k is not a substitute for a pension. Companies are offering that, but that's not a substitute for a pension. But yet, our teachers are underpaid. Our workers can't get pensions. Our people don't have adequate social benefits. How are we sending $3.9 billion to Ukraine for that? See, these are the things that upset people and make people feel like they either don't want to vote for the Democrats or they want to sit it out because they feel ambivalent. And nobody should sit this out. Trump must be defeated. But if you want to defeat Trump, you better offer a better policy.
All right. So a lot was said. Let me let Michael respond. And I don't want to get to this article before we end. We're going to have to shorten it now because our time is coming to the essence. Michael, a lot was said by Brother Larry. You want to respond to anything that he said, my brother?
Yeah, just very quickly here, we talked about the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. The South wanted 100% of the slave population counted. The North said, you don't even want to recognize that they're human. How are you going to count the full population? Because the northern states were saying, if you count the full population of the slaves in these states like Virginia, and Virginia at the time had like the highest slave population, that would give the South a huge dominance in the House of Representatives, and they can just push through whatever bills that they wanted. Okay, and then number two, with the Electoral College, to eliminate the Electoral College, a bill has to pass the House of Representatives and the Senate by 2/3 majority vote, then pass 3/4 of the state legislatures by 2/3 majority vote. So because Republicans won 2 elections by losing the popular vote and winning the Electoral College vote, they probably not going to vote for that. So I do think it should be eliminated, but Republicans are not going to vote for that. So we're going to have to educate our people on how this works. And then when we look at the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, there was, well, first of all, this last summer, there were 270 strikes, labor strikes across the country. Some of those were labor unions. Some of those were teacher unions, I should say, because in this country, you have a lot of teachers that are represented by teacher unions. So they went on strike for higher wages. In the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, there was something like $360 billion that was for first responders, but it also went to fund schools and teachers, because coming out of COVID, you had to pay for better ventilation systems so you can have smaller classrooms, and pay for more teachers as well. So even though 3.5 billion, now I'm not sure what's in the current budget, because the Congress hasn't passed the budget yet. They're on I think their third continuing resolution. So because Republicans can't govern, so they haven't passed the budget yet. But if people go and look at the fact sheet from whitehouse.gov, I'll post it here in the chat. President Biden issues call for state and, that's not the one I want. There's one on the American Rescue Plan that breaks down what's in the American Rescue Plan and how it's helping people, okay? Because there was money in that American Rescue Plan that helped and funded teachers also. I get Larry's point, but oftentimes that's not talked about, and how that helped teachers. So for the Three-Fifths Compromise, is a good article that I teach from theroot.com. I'm not a big fan of the Root, but this is a good article. Three-Fifths Clause, Why Its Taint Persists. It's by historian Paul Finkelman.
Post it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it in the chat.
No,
yeah.
I already did.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He's a history professor. I interviewed him on the African History Network show a few years ago. He's the author of 50 books, and he gets deep into the history of the Three-Fifths Compromise and how it's misunderstood. And Section 2 of the 14th Amendment of 1868 corrected how the count is taken as well. But all that deals with history. All that deals with politics. So I'll leave it there for now.
Real quick, somebody asked this because it said, real quick, Michael Imhotep, because I want to get to this article real quick.
Yeah. Because
it says that, you convicted of a felon or not being able to vote, and in the Constitution, it doesn't say, it gives the criteria of what is the criteria to run as a president, and it doesn't say a person convicted of a felon cannot run for the president. Correct. So then the person came back, so where does it says a felon can't vote in the Constitution? And I don't think it's in the Constitution. Well, I think it's more of a Supreme Court and then state laws. But can you explain that?
State law. So first of all, when the framers framed the Constitution, they didn't think the convicted felon would run for president. They never thought that would happen. Number one. Number two, the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, powers that are not explicitly given to the federal government go to the states. 10th Amendment deals with states' rights. So that's why you have really 50 individual elections for president because you have the state government, state legislatures that regulate that. The felony disenfranchisement was that law targets African-American men. That's why that was put in place. Florida in 1868, when Florida wrote their state constitution, they imposed a felony disenfranchisement law. So you lost your right to vote for life if you were convicted of a felony. They also expanded the number of crimes that were classified as a felony. And in 1868, African-Americans made up 48% of the state population in Florida. We were almost half the population as a result of slavery. And they said they were doing this to prevent a Negro legislature because they knew we were voting high numbers and put African-Americans in place. Now, contrast that to Maine and Vermont. In Maine and Vermont, where Senator Bernie Sanders is from, right now, if you are a convicted felon sitting in prison, you can vote from prison because Maine and Vermont historically did not have high populations of African-Americans. But when you look at states, especially these former Confederate states, like Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama, things like this, that had those felony disenfranchisement laws, it was targeting us. This is why. So that deals with actually understanding the laws once again and how those laws have to be changed. You have to vote people into office who would change those laws.
Got it. So the reason why I'm bringing this article up, because, you know, I was at, matter of fact, I decided to not, when I was in Denver, when Senator Barack Obama was going to accept, you know, the nomination at the convention for president, that night, one of the beginning nights, I did not go down to the convention center. I stayed home, and I remember waking up, and I think it was on PBS. It was, you know, talking about what was going on when New York Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm ran in 1972 for president. And I sat in awe. I sat up in the bed. I said some choice words. These Negroes did what? These black men did what? I was like, you are serious. I lost it. I got a chance to meet, you know, Congressman Shirley Chisholm back in high school. Well, I was not politics like that, you know. So there's an article in today's New York Daily News. And the reason why I bring this up, because I feel like it's going to become, they're going to try to use this as a distraction point out there. But this was a reality out there. I see certain things when it does come down to black men. It is a legitimate conversation, but it's a legitimate conversation. But is it a conversation that we should be having? Is it where are black men now? Of course, we saw the call, you know, 2-3 Sundays ago with the first night with the black women, then the next night the black men, and so on there. So this article in the New York Times is titled "Black Men Rally for Kamala Harris and Confront an Elephant in the Room." The article is written by Zolan Cano Youngs and Erica L. Green. Both are black. And I'll start off here. And Michael, I haven't heard the number change, but in the article it says, in a powerful show of unity, over 40,000. That 40,000 was over 40,000 was Sunday night with the women. Sabrina was on that call. I came in on that call to try to help people get in that call. But the next night, I remember hearing the number was over 21,000 of black men from across the country joined that virtual fundraising call to back Vice President Kamala Harris' bid for the Democratic presidential nominee. But beyond the support, these men confronted a long-standing challenge: the hesitation to stand behind black women in leadership roles. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul addressed this head-on, urging that backing Vice President Harris displays strength, not weakness. This moment echoes the past as these men recall the pushback Shirley Chisholm, New York Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, faced from her black male colleagues when she ran for president in 1972. Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm's struggles underline a historical reluctance that still lingers, making this rally for Harris not just about an election, but a deep-seated shift in perspective. As Harris aims to secure the nomination, these black male leaders are calling on their peers to recognize that supporting her is crucial, not just for her campaign, but for the broader fight to protect and advance the progress they've worked so hard to achieve. You know,
but Dean, could I say something? A point of information on this.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go into a long rant. Black men in 2016 voted 84% for the Democratic Party nominee. In 2020, Black men voted 88% for the Democratic. The only group, the only demographic, population demographic to vote higher than Black men was Black women. I think that this discussion about Black men's voting is problematical. Number one, I agree with some of the things that your co-host, Jennifer Jones-Austin, said on the radio show this morning, that Black men's issues do need to be spoken to and are not being spoken to adequately in this political discussion. But I also believe that Black men are being demonized in this political discussion because of the attention that some Black influencers on social media, some Black artists, Black individuals, their opinions are being given prima facie as evidence for the thinking of the Black masses. So when the statistics, let me finish. When the statistics say otherwise.
Yeah, but Larry, what I'm saying, but
Black men are voting, and I predict this.
Yeah, but that's not the question.
Black men
that's not the question.
If they voted 88% for a white man,
right,
Joe Biden, they're going to vote in a higher percentage for a woman of color. I predict that. And I think
we can't
the discussion is helping to further alienate Black men.
And that's why. Wait. Let me just say this.
14% of Black men didn't vote.
Wait. Hold on, because I want to throw this out here. That's why I said this is a discussion. That's why I said some will use it as a distraction. But the reality, Larry, there's a reality right now. The last time a Black woman ran for president, she had pushback in the Democratic Party amongst Black men. Hold on.
I don't argue that.
Hold on, Larry. Let me finish. Let me finish because I want to throw this question out. Because I was throwing it to the guests, and then we have our go around. This is not a debate. This is an article that we've seen this happen before. We've seen this when it came down to the nomination of Ketanji Brown, the judge Ketanji Brown. We saw Black men, some Black men that was not happy. So I'm not saying it can be used as a distraction. It may not be the reality, but this is something that has happened before when a Black woman ran for president within her party. So that's my question. And that's why I want to throw out to Michael, and then we have our go around. This is an article written, but this is not only, this is something that has been addressed before that daggone call Monday night, that after the women's call Sunday night. Where will Black men stand on backing a African American or a Black woman running for president? So let me just put this out there and we have our go around because our time is very short. Go ahead, Brother Michael.
Yeah, so you're correct on the misogyny that Shirley Chisholm experienced when she ran for president, and some of that misogyny came from Black men. This time around, even though you do have, you have Black social media disinformation agents out here, and people really have to be careful of these social media platforms where these are faceless platforms targeting African Americans, targeting Black people, putting out negative disinformation. Okay. And at the same time, they usually don't have information criticizing Donald Trump at the same time. You got to be really careful of that. And what you do is go to this, like on Facebook, there's one of them. I'm not going to say the name. Go to page transparency and see who these people are. When they don't tell you who runs the page, you need to speculate. And when they're outside of the country, you need to be leery of them. Okay. But I think this is something that I think we're going to see a change now, because we didn't see a call like what happened on July 21st. And I was on that call also. There was 20,000 on StreamYard with Roland Martin and the brothers, one with black men. And then there was thousands more that were watching and streaming. We haven't seen this type of movement take place really before. People say 08, President Obama, social media wasn't developed like it was then. So I think because African-American men are organizing early on, I think that we're going to be able to communicate with other brothers and get this information out, and for people really to see, okay, she is the best option. Women, other countries have had female prime ministers and leaders, things like this. The U.S. is way behind in the times. It's past time for that. And you have some African-American men who realized what happened when Donald Trump got in office, and they said, oh, we should have voted for Hillary Clinton. You had white women who said that also, because on the white women's call, organizer for Kamala Harris, they were talking about it on MSNBC and interviewing some of the women on the call. The first 35, 40 minutes, they were talking about how they got it wrong in 2016 and how they should have voted for Hillary Clinton, the ones who did not vote for her, because they saw what happened with Trump in office. What Vice President Kamala Harris has to do really quickly is put out the accurate information about her history as San Francisco District Attorney, as well as Attorney General of the state of California, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. This time around, I think a lot of people realize why you need prosecutors, because we saw Donald Trump and we saw the crimes Donald Trump committed. And it was Alvin Bragg in New York who held Donald Trump accountable. It's Fani Willis down in Atlanta trying to hold Donald Trump accountable. It's prosecutors holding a criminal accountable. So a lot of them realize, oh yeah, she's the one who can really prosecute this case against this criminal Donald Trump.
So going back to Larry, because Larry is making a point, that's why I want to have this discussion now, not in 3 and 4 weeks, where it can be utilized, and some people say it could be utilized as a distraction now. But we want to have this conversation because it is an elephant in the room, and we might as well have that conversation now, because we know that with Kamala Harris getting ready to drop her economic programs coming this week and things like that, we want to get into this discussion about policy. We want to get into the discussion of economic issues and the international policies, things like that. We want to have those discussions. But since this, I just came across, I didn't know, I came across this article this morning. It's in today's New York Times. So don't think that this is not something that Reverend Sharpton may discuss on MSNBC or CNN may discuss. It's just a talking point. But Larry's point is valid, that you're right, that this may not be what it says it may be, but it's worth the conversation, because I'm telling you, before this change of direction, there have been a lot of black men that said they were going to vote for Trump. I didn't say a whole bunch, but I'm telling you, I have family members that I can't vote for Biden. So, but that was Biden. But now we have a black woman. But I see a different momentum now, that I see that even some of those folks that said, I can't vote for the Democrat, I can't vote for a black woman, I've seen they're changing their tune. So Larry, go ahead and finish that point, and then we'll go to Sabrina and Jamie, and then we'll wrap up.
No, I think if we have data, we should use it. So in 2016, there were black people, men and women, who said they were going to vote for Donald Trump. In fact, some of them were religious leaders that stood over Trump and prayed for him. And you would think, based on the media attention, that this represented a major feeling in the Black community. But when you look at the data, in 2016, 84% of Black men voted for the Democratic Party nominee. The only demographic higher than that was Black women. Nearly 70% of white men voted for Trump. Nearly 60% of white women voted for Trump. 30% of Latinos voted for Trump. But nobody talks about them. If 70% of white men are voting for Trump, I would think we'd be talking. It's just like Brother Imhotep said, you know, if you're going to ask these questions of Kamala Harris, you're going to ask these questions of Trump. If you're going to use this data on Black men, you got to use data on other men, you know, on other people. 84% of Black men voted for the Democratic Party nominee in 2016. 88% of Black men voted for the Democratic nominee in 2020. Again, the only group higher for Black men, about 55% or so in that.
So you, Larry, so you don't think it's a conversation that a Black woman running for president that has become the nominee is not a question, will Black men support her? Because you're giving statistics on the nominee, but it's never been a Black woman as the nominee. That's the question that we're dealing with. Okay. This is my position. If 84% of Black men voted for the Democratic Party nominee in 2016, and 88%, an even higher percentage, voted for the Democratic Party nominee in 2020, I think as high or higher, I think because she's a woman of color, she identifies as a Black woman, I think it's going to be higher. All right. I leave it there. I mean, it's your opinion.
Right.
I got it.
And this is why you have polls. It's the difference between an individual decision or, an individual opinion or an opinion of a group of people and the opinion of an entire aggregate.
I got it. I just got to move the clock. I got to move the clock here. I got to move this clock.
Let me say one more thing about Shirley Chisholm. In the article on Shirley Chisholm, did they give any data? Because this could have very well been with the Shirley Chisholm situation, Shirley Chisholm vis-a-vis Black male leaders in the Democratic Party. But is there any data on how Black men voted for Shirley Chisholm? Now, I'm going to tell you one other thing. I was at the Democratic National Convention in 1972. I was an elected delegate. And the whole Shirley Chisholm row was connected to the National Black Political Convention. How? Because the National Black Political Convention had invited Shirley Chisholm as the only Black presidential candidate. She was invited. She was asked to come and address the convention. And she did not do so. She chose instead to go and meet with McGovern, who I believe was in Florida at the time. So, you know, there's history and there's history. But the main point is, in this article about Shirley Chisholm, if no data was actually offered as to how Black men voted, then, you know, it becomes, you know, it was
pushback in our party. It was the pushback. I mean, Michael Imhotep, you know the history. It was the pushback in the party. The article never talks. The article doesn't talk about the voting statistics on her. They talk about the pushback within her own party that helped failed her. That's what they said. And then they springboard, can that, when it comes down to voting, will there be some pushback from Black men when it comes to voting? Brother Imhotep, do you have any more to add to the Shirley Chisholm piece? Before I go to Jamie and then
not really.
Sabrina.
There's a movie starring Regina King. It's on Netflix, I think, that is in. It's about Shirley Chisholm and her running for president. So it gets into what happened and the misogyny she faced, things of this nature. I think this time around, we're positioned for this to be different. And in addition to the percentage of African-American men turning out, the total number that turn out is also important. Okay. So I think this year, so because in 2020, 16.9 million African Americans voted for Biden Harris. There were 30 million registered to vote. I forgot the exact percentage turnout, but it was 16.9 million. So Larry's correct on the percentage, but we also have to boost the total number that vote as well. So you can have a high percentage, but a low turnout. Okay. So that's important also. But I think this time around is going to be different. We have to make sure we educate people on the policy, on the issues, and then have them compare that to Trump. And you had a lot of men, you have some Black male hip hop artists in particular who said they're voting for Donald Trump, things like this. Some of them have criminal records. Some of them, when you listen to them, they really can't articulate good policy, or they'll say it's the stimulus checks, things like that. Well, that came from Congress. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution, power of the purse, the ability to tax and spend belongs to Congress. And it was Democrats who were advocating for larger stimulus checks, for better for better care packages, COVID packages. And then the last one, the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that saved the economy, that brought us out of COVID. The reason why it passed the Senate was because Vice President Kamala Harris, the Black woman, was the tie-breaking vote. So I don't know how they can give Trump credit for a bill that he signed when Democrats made it better, but don't give Democrats and Vice President Kamala Harris credit for a bill that they wrote. Republicans didn't write the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. Democrats got to take credit for what you did. And this is something I've been saying, because a lot of Americans can't name 5 things in the American Rescue Plan, because it was so close. It was at the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration. So they just lumped that into the other COVID packages. Yeah. That was all Democrats.
Yeah. But Brother Imhotep, real quick, we also complain about the Democrats' messaging is horrible too. Their messaging is not the greatest out there. So that's that. I'm going to get Jamie in here.
I think it's getting better now.
Right now, and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes there can be a change and a shift that you never seen coming that can make things and go uphill and get better. And the things that we complained about, we can start to check off some of those boxes of those things that we address and get better at. And that's why we got to be more optimistic than pessimistic. That I see that pessimism there that just bothers me. But let me just say this, the PBS piece that I'm talking about is called Chisholm 72. And it's in 1968, Shirley Chisholm becomes the first Black woman elected to Congress. In 1972, she becomes the first Black woman to run for president, shunned by political establishment. She's supported by a motley crew of Blacks, feminists, and young voters. Their campaign trail adventures are frenzied, fierce, and fundamentally right on. And the reason why I promote a lot of PBS, because a lot of their programming is dead on, spot on, especially when I watch and learn so much from the eyes on the prize. From the eyes on the prize. You understand? With that being said, let me get Jamie in, then Sabrina, and then we'll wrap this up. Jamie.
I wholly am aligned and agree with Larry's salient points. This is another way to divide. This is another way to weaponize, race and separate Black men from Black women, Black men from the support. And again, I'm a registered independent. The support of the candidate who has the collective interests of Black people. our best interests. It is irrelevant from a standpoint of what is taking place today, what took place in 1972. I think it's instructive from a historical perspective, but the zeitgeist is completely different. And we have to focus and laser in on the zeitgeist of today. As Imhotep pointed out, and he stated exactly what I was going to state, Larry was very clear and precise with his percentages, but it's about the turnout. Where Imhotep is in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in Philadelphia, the surrounding area, Black men were essentially blamed for Hillary Clinton's loss because of a lack of voter turnout amongst Black men in the 2016 election. That became the narrative, right? Although the percentages were high. Oh, well, 88% of Black men voted, but not enough for you turned out. Well, on this platform, we always talk about the importance of voter turnout. But when we essentially ascribe Hillary Clinton's loss to Black men in 3 states and in 3 urban areas, then that's a false narrative. And then Black men certainly are saying, well, we came out to vote. And so if you are not going to speak directly to us, and Kamala Harris has to do that, it can't be in generalities, it has to be in specifics, how the economic platform and how the platform in general will benefit Black men and why Black men certainly will support that platform, then yes, she may not get the number or the percentage of turnout that they're expecting or that they're hoping for. I don't think that to be the case. Black men are going to support Kamala Harris. People are seduced and swayed by celebrity, by public figures on social media, as Imhotep said, the disinformation. And listen, man, most people are going to look at what is affecting them. As Imhotep said on a radio show this morning, the kitchen table issues. And the Democrats can win on those kitchen table issues. We talked about student loan forgiveness. The collective student loan debt is 1.7 trillion. Donald Trump added 7.8 trillion to the federal deficit, to the national debt. Those are the points that need to be made and emphasized and repeated. And I think the mantra, right? And I think this essentially what has become the rallying cry, we will not go back, will resonate. I think that was brilliant because we will not go back. But let's not go back to 1972 either and talk about how Black men didn't support Shirley Chisholm. Larry was at the Gary Convention. Larry was a 1972 delegate at the Democratic Convention. He just gave you a firsthand account. A firsthand account. Black men will come out. Black men will come out in Detroit. Black men will come out in Milwaukee. Black men will come out in Philadelphia. But Kamala Harris and Walz have to speak directly to Black men.
I appreciate that. And like I said, I just turned from a viewer said, this is a conversation, just like when Jennifer raised about would white women support a Black candidate, a Black female candidate. It's a conversation that needs to be had. It's not a conversation. Well, one thing we're not doing in this time is not running from it. I hear what you're saying, Jamie, and I'm not agreeing.
Let me
finish.
This is important. What Larry talked about, and we have to give credence to what Larry said. Trump is an isolationist, and Trump has isolationist policies. But we can't dismiss those isolationist policies because geopolitically right now, the Democrats have to seize control of not just the narrative, not just the portrayal, but the actuality of what's taking place. We keep sending money to Ukraine, we keep sending money to Israel, yet we call for a ceasefire, right? Trump's isolationist policies appeal to a broad demographic, not just MAGAs, but it appeals to Black people, it appeals to Latinos, it appeals to white people because of the personal economic struggles that people are having. And people are saying, well, if you can send money to Ukraine, you can send money to Israel, but in our communities, we don't have access to capital. We don't have access to clean drinking water, right? We're looking at our crumbling infrastructure, even though Biden certainly passed the infrastructure bill that Trump talked about all 4 years and didn't pass. But the Democrats, and I agree with Michael, are getting better at messaging, but they have to be even better, right? And they can't speak and intellectualize it.
Yeah.
Speak in common terms. No, hold on, Patino, don't cut me off.
I'm not, but yeah, but I thought you was coming back on this topic. You wanted another topic.
I am, but it's important because you talked about messaging. Speak in very common, clear, pointed terms. You know, when Sarah gets on TV, I'm watching them, you know, it's like a dissertation. Speak to people directly, clear, common language, which Trump does. He dumbs it down, but the Democrats have to understand. You can't intellectualize this too much. You have to speak to people's hearts, and it has to be visceral.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I'm not going to say that. We wasn't getting that from Biden. He's a great job before. We wasn't getting that from Biden. Now you're right there. And just to go back on the Shirley Chisholm thing, remember, she was not the Democratic nominee. That's what I'm saying. She was upset in her party by a lot of her colleagues, specifically Black men at that particular time. You're right, Jamie. Times have changed, but has mentalities changed? So we'll see. Again, that's not, you know, this is a discussion. Let me bring in Sister Sabrina on that. But remember, who was it? It was McGovern. It was McGovern that became the nominee in 1972 for the Democratic Party. Sister Sabrina, your comments on this article.
Sure. So the way that I think about it is, who's the messenger? And when I look at newsrooms, I mean, the reason why the National Black Association of Journalists exists is to advocate, to have voices, decision-making, editorial participation in the angles, the so-called news that they dump on Americans or people in general to believe and consume. And so those two reporters probably didn't even write that headline. It was an editor that, according to presswatchers.org, are absolutely committed to white dominant culture and are not committed to diversity in the newsroom. So the reporters don't decide on the headlines. Really, they had probably some other editors that don't look like any of us to re-edit the article that they initially submitted. So this is my angle on my point on that. Did they write an article on, are the white women going to support Vice President Kamala Harris? Is this the same newsroom that continued to levy the drum beat for the Iraqi war and the assault on the genocide that's going in Gaza? Is that it? And is this supposed to be reflective of all Black men? How many Black men did they talk to? And the people, and the Black men that are in favor of Cheetah Man, they've been against Black women since they came out of their mama's womb. Seriously. And probably, like Imhotep said, pull back the layer, and they're probably in some basement in another country. So I reject any frames, any article, or the Black men going to support the Black women like the Black men. And particularly if it's coming out of a newsroom that don't look like any of us. So I reject it totally. And I also reject continuing to ignoring voices. When, I believe that you ignore voices at your own peril. You don't have to agree with them or whatever. And when Larry brought up in terms of the uncommitted, Minnesota has the largest group of uncommitted. We're talking about 43,000 delegates. Voters that voted uncommitted in Minnesota. I say to everybody, don't ignore. We can't afford to lose any while advocating for the issues that you care about. We can't afford to ignore any voices. And when
70,000 votes. 70,000 votes was the difference between Hillary Clinton winning and and Trump winning. 70,000 votes in 3 states and 3 urban areas: Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, those surrounding areas. So 100,000 votes, as you pointed out and Larry pointed out, are critical.
And we can't ignore that. We can't ignore that. And so when, I tried to digest very little of the 24-hour cable networks, because they say the same old thing all the time without getting into the voices in the section. The Black men like the Black women, and the Black women. you're interviewing or so-called interviewing people that have a demonstrated hatred of either Black women or Black women that hate Black men. Okay, let's just get, and I'm glad that they're raising their voices in their hatred of themselves. I'm so happy. So I know, who they are. So I can recognize and call them out when they need to be called out. So I reject this kind of lies and determination to have a wedge issue when as far as I know, no article has been released or published about will white women, will Pakistani women, will Latino women support Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Walz? And will we address, or how will we address as a party, the uncommitted voters who are saying, according to a Minnesota newsroom, that are saying, look, I'm still aligning my vote to the fact that my family has been slaughtered. So we have to hear them. And I'm not Palestinian, and I'm not from the Sudan, but I care about these issues. And yes, the Biden administration has a very successful domestic policy, but we have to look at all of it, because if we ignore violence there and then wonder, well, why are there so many Sudanese coming here? That's why. That's why. And I denounce totally violence anywhere. And the congressmen that keep standing up and down for the genocide that's happening there are always representing districts of Black people who are suffering economically, emotionally, with lack of access and opportunity for generations. But we let them stay in office. So I reject the article. I reject the New York Times. And until they hire more Black folks with some autonomy in terms of their reporting, as opposed to these wedge issues, I don't care.
And Sabrina, and the research institutions, Pew and others that I follow, in aggregate, had white women voting for Trump in 2016 at 52%. You would think that would decrease, and I was adamant. And I was adamant that it would in 2020. I was dead wrong. The percentage went up to 55% in 2020 in the vote.
Where's the article?
52%.
Yeah. Jamie, where is that headline? Where's that headline?
Yeah. So
I want that article.
And this is why.
Why didn't those editors' wives vote for Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, and let me just say this. This is why we had this conversation this morning. Because if we don't have this damn conversation, you don't hear the different viewpoints. I don't regret bringing this up, because we needed to have this. We needed to hear what Larry had to say. We needed to hear what Sabrina, Jamie, Michael Imhotep. I'm not here bringing this article as supporting the article. I put it on the table because there's going to be discussion, and I wanted us to be on the record, because there's other things that we need to talk about down the road. So if it comes up down the road where it's more important things and it's used as a distraction, then we could tell folks, you know what, go back to this program on August 11th and check out the conversation on that, where we can continue to move forward.
Brother Michael Imhotep, I can say it. He wants to respond. Let him get in, 15. Let Brother Imhotep get in.
Oh, I know. I'm going to let him in, because this is the last response, because this is it. We get ready to wrap. Brother Michael, go.
So very quickly, yes, African-American men in those cities in 2016 got blamed partially or wholly for Hillary Clinton losing. But here in Michigan, 50,000 people voted for Jill Stein.
Yes.
Okay. Donald Trump won Michigan by 10,704 votes. Then another 50,000 voted in Michigan, but left the top of the ticket for president vacant. They didn't vote for anybody for president. That's 100,000 votes.
They voted down ballot, but they didn't vote for the president.
That's huge.
If you look at Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the number of votes that Jill Stein got in those three states was greater than Trump's margin of victory in those three swing states.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that voted for Jill Stein really don't get the blame. It comes up now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But, now the other thing is,
so where is that article? I didn't get. Anybody get that article?
There are articles dealing with the NBC News has it. I got thousands. Look, I got thousands.
Will Jill Stein's voters vote for VP Harris?
I got thousands of articles here in the office. But let me get to this other point. This piece here from today from the New York Times is dealing partly with how African American men are rallying behind Vice President Kamala Harris to support her.
That's the day. That's the article.
It's the article. The name of the article.
The
name of the article is Black.
I reject their version of it.
The name of the article is Black Men Rally.
Exactly.
Kamala Harris and confront an elephant.
Exactly. Sabrina, you can reject it, but it is a positive article.
The elephant in the room. What does that mean?
It is an elephant in the room.
Let me explain to people.
No, it's not.
I have 1 million followers on my Facebook fan page, the African History Network. I got 75,000 followers on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. I see the posts coming, and I see people posing to be Black men on social media.
That's
maybe
right.
some are, maybe some are not. But I saw this when she was running in 2019.
Exactly.
I saw this when
it is not a reality when you
reality.
Sabrina, it is not. It is not a reality if you don't know who the
Let Brother Michael finish.
I saw this when she got the nomination to be vice president in 2020, and then people putting out a lot of misinformation about her on social media.
Yes.
So I'm not saying all Black men or most Black men feel that way negatively about her, won't vote against her, but won't vote for her. But what this article is focusing on is how Black men are rallying behind her.
Yes.
And at the same time confronting the disinformation and misogyny out there, which needs to happen, because I was on the call with 20,000 men, 20,000 Black men win for Black men, and this is one of the things we were talking about.
Exactly, we were there.
We said over and over again, look, we're gonna have to go to bat for her. We're gonna have to protect her.
Yes.
We're gonna have to deal with the disinformation out there, and some of the disinformation is coming from elevated rappers and entertainers.
Some I never heard of, but go ahead.
Some of them half Black, like Amber Rose, who doesn't even want to.
Lil Wayne.
Lil Wayne.
People. Yeah, come
Lil
on.
Wayne got a part.
They're probably not even registered to vote. But what I'm saying is there's also a concentrated bot targeting of our community.
That's true.
That's true, Sabrina, but you can't ignore this neither. I think it's just saying, Michael, this is a bot.
Michael,
the bots are true.
Michael, what I'm saying to you,
and you can ignore me as you want to. The bottom line is the reality of a conversation.
And you already experienced
it's like that whole thing with the Biden.
What I'm saying is that there's a concentrated movement from different parts of the world that you peel back the reality of who these accounts represent, and they're bots, they're computerized bots. That's what I'm saying.
So that's part of the disinformation campaign.
Yes.
What they do is they influence real Black, some real Black men on the ground level who many times are low information voters.
Yes.
But if it wasn't, wait. But if it wasn't a situation, then why did it become a topic on our call that Monday night, Michael? Because it is a concern.
Yes,
it is a concern.
Let it be a concern.
This is
another concern too. Yes,
they want to get it.
All of it's a concern. But I'm saying to us that there's also misinformation, and I don't trust New York Times in that take what their thesis as carte blanche, like, oh, okay, there must be an elephant in the room. When all these Black men are showing up and showing out in support, not of her, not of Vice President Harris, it's the policies that they see that they can be invested in or connected to. I hope we're not voting into representatives who they represent, but with the policies that can be demonstrated. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, God, and it's cool. It's cool. Yeah. We have this disagreement. We had this disagreement about Biden before. So it is what it is. You know, I'm just saying that it is a conversation. I've had this conversation in real time, and it's and what Sabrina's saying is also right, that there are bots out there. She schooled me on something that now I've learned, but I do know that what we talked about on that call that night was real. I watched arguing with some people out here. I'm not going to call their names. They're not on this show. But they're friends of mine. And we debated on how they was coming out with the support for Judge Ketanji Brown when she was nominated for Supreme Court Justice, and how people some of our Black men seem like they have an issue sometimes supporting Black women. This is just a conversation.
And there are Black women who are vehemently against Vice President Harris.
Of course, we know that.
But that's what I'm saying. The framing of this, that the elephant in the room only rests with Black men. And I reject that. I'm saying that there are Black women publicly that are denouncing or their support of Vice President Harris.
But let me ask you this. But that's fine, Sabrina. But that's fine. And your question is right. Where are those articles? You just can't see the men being demonized. But if it's still an issue, you could say, okay, I can see this still being an elephant in the room, but it's not the only elephant in the room. Where are the other articles?
Where is that article? And where is the complete, there's a Christian national Christian movement in this country, particularly in the South, that does not embrace, does not agree with women leadership on the church level, definitely not on government level. And there are women that are supporting that. They only co-sign male leadership. And
Sabrina,
where's that?
We're holding right there.
Christian national movement.
Because we're gonna have to. We gotta have our go around. Jamie, you can say that in your closing because we got to get out of here. We got to go, guys. I got my brother over a half hour, so let's have our closing thoughts. Jamie, just say that thought to your closing. You can add that to your closing. Michael Imhotep, first of all, thank you, my brother. Give out information.
Thank you for letting us yell at you.
Thank you, brother, for joining us on both shows. And, thank you for all the great work that you do out there on your programs as well as your website, doing out there with Roland Martin on Unfiltered as well, man. And I appreciate our friendship, my brother. Thank you, my brother. Give out the information how people can get in touch with you and also your final thoughts for today.
Yeah, visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It has my information there. You can register for my online history classes. I'm teaching the class today. These are multi-week classes, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, and Black resistance movements, Christopher Columbus to the Haitian Revolution to the Black Power movement, 1492 to 1968. You can call me 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003. And listen to the African History Network show Sundays. We'll be on today, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Reese Colbert to deal with the disinformation floating around about Vice President Kamala Harris. But I want to thank you all for this platform. I'd like to come back whenever you want to have me also. Okay, so.
Brother, you'll be back, my brother. Okay. We'll just stay in contact and we'll get you back time to time.
Yes.
Jamie, you're going, let me just say this. Thank you, brother. Don't go nowhere yet. Let me just say to Jamie, you're going to hell, Jamie. You know why? I say it because me and Sabrina going at it, he couldn't hide his face from laughing. And somebody said our passion is real, but the love is real on here too. So yeah, that is true. We don't have to make that disclaimer. Sometimes we go just disagree, and it's gonna be passionate. But one thing we not gonna do, and especially I'm not. If I ever do anything that's disrespectful to any of my colleagues, especially our cousin Sabrina, I will always apologize because I don't mean that, but I'm passionate, she's passionate, and that goes without saying. We love one another, but there's times when we have our opinions in agreement, we're going to push, and we supposed to. With that being said, cousin Sabrina, your final thoughts.
Michael Imhotep, would you repeat your telephone number, please? Are you sure you want to share your phone number? Because
yes, he already did it.
It's all right. Yeah, 313.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, 313-462-0003.
Yeah.
And people can email me through the website also, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. They can email me through the website as well. I've given out my number for 14 years. So.
Okay, all right.
That's not my main number.
Okay. Well, I have your Social Security number. I'll give that out.
That's the business line for the African History Network.
I just, we always have this conversation and really appreciate our cousins in the chat. They're very committed and supportive of this conversation and work, and they add their own insights. Is that, the more focused, unified, and educated, with a political defense, as Michael Imhotep says all the time, the better that we will be. We have to address the unheard voices. We have to understand when a distraction is coming for you or your attention. What's not being talked about in New York City is a high rise of not only COVID, that CDC is tracking COVID. It is increasing. Please wear your mask if you choose. Sabrina gonna wear a mask, but also there's a high rash of deed theft in this city, where people will go down to City Hall, the Agency of Finance, and change the deed on your property. And so I'm going to post links in the chat where you can be notified if there's been a change in name, change of ownership, whatever it is, because home ownership or ownership of real estate is one of the pathways to financial security, generational. And you don't want your grandmother, your aunt, or whatever who lived in Brooklyn or lived in Queens who owned that home, and suddenly it's being owned by a thief. So I'm going to post that link in the chat. And as always, you can contact me through Wekeza, WEKEZA.com. That means save and invest in Swahili.
Thank you, Sabrina. Sabrina has sent that message out about the CDC still tracking COVID. It's just not tracked the way it once was, especially in certain states, how it's being done. And then a lot of people are not reporting it. A lot of people are not testing. And if they are testing, they're home testing. And if they're positive, they stay home unless they're really sick to go to the doctors or the hospitals. Also on the deed theft, I believe 2 to 3 weeks ago, we had New York Attorney General Letitia James on, who created there was basically a law passed that now can go after those people that are preying on people with these deed thefts, a criminal act. So she came on the Open Line on Air show about 2 to 3 weeks ago to talk about that deed theft. Thank you, Sabrina, for bringing that up. Larry, your final thoughts, my brother.
I'm so glad we had our brother on, Michael Imhotep. He certainly exemplifies his name, the great Imhotep of ancient Egyptian antiquity, was a Renaissance genius, and that was reflected here on this program this morning, and I look forward to his return on future programs. Good move for team. Good move, Captain.
Thank you, brother.
A friend of mine told me this week that at St. James AME Church, where Reverend Slaughter is the pastor, they have a social action committee, and that Reverend Slaughter in church told the head of the social action committee that for every Sunday from now until the cutoff date, he wants a table set up by the door, and that voter registration will be done at that church every Sunday. I thought that was a good idea. I hope that people will try to replicate that effort, because as active as we know that many church people are, there's still a lot of folks that are unactive and not registered. And, a lot of people are registered, but the Republicans are trying to purge a lot of us from the rolls. So even if you registered, check your registration, make sure your paperwork is right, so you don't have any disappointments when you go to the voting booth on November 5th. But I would urge other churches, if they haven't done so already, to do voter registration every Sunday on the way after, as people are leaving the church during service. The other thing is, there's some things I think the Biden administration should do, I think would help them win the election. We've been trying to get H.R. 40 passed for almost 40 years. I think the Biden administration, through executive order, should go ahead and just set up a reparations commission through executive order, because that's what H.R. 40 would do. It's set up a commission to make recommendations to Congress on how reparations should be made to African Americans that are the descendants of those that were enslaved in this country. I think Biden should go ahead, if he was to go ahead and appoint a reparations commission, I think that would help him get more black votes. With regard to the murder of Sonia Massey by Officer Grayson, who trying to get out of jail. He was denied pre-trial release this week. I think the president should set up a national commission on police brutality, do the same thing, make recommendation on remedies to eliminate police brutality in the United States. Because since the murder of Michael Brown, the number of police shooting deaths has increased every year, each year with more deaths than the previous year. Up to this year, last year, 1,332 people killed by the police in this country. And lastly, I think if the Biden administration made a phone call the way President Reagan did to the prime minister, I think Reagan made his phone call to Menachem Begin and said, if you continue along this path, we're going to cut off aid. And Menachem Begin ended that aggression against the Palestinians at that time. I think President Biden should bring down the hammer and say this has to end, because you're getting ready to drag the whole world into a conflagration. If he did these three things, I think that he would definitely nail down victory in November.
Thank you, Brother Larry. Let me just thank our producer, Knowledge Born. Thank our special guest, Michael Imhotep. Thank our cousins in the chat, and especially our team members that are here, Jamie Harris, Larry Ham, cousin Sabrina Lamb, and Bobby Childs, who is off today. Jamie, you can finish that thought, and you can close us out, my brother.
Sabrina, I just wanted to say that Christian nationalism is a euphemism for white supremacy. Mm-hmm. So Christian nationalists are white supremacists, and they're one and the same. I want to say justice for Breonna Taylor, justice for Sonia Massey, justice for the Spivey family, justice for all of those who, Larry, for decades, you have been fighting for on the front lines, sweating, toiling, putting in days and hours and years of work and protests, meeting with elected officials, meeting with families. It doesn't matter whether you are of African descent, whether you are of European descent, Asian descent, Latino descent. The innocent and flagrant and tragic murders of people by officers charged to protect and serve has to end, and they have to be held accountable. As I said, there are over 700,000 law enforcement officers in this country. An overwhelming majority go out every day and try to do their job with probity. But then you have the Graysons and the Derek Chauvins and others, and they have to be brought to justice. Fatin, it's going to be very interesting, the Democratic Convention. Momentum, it is palpable, but there's still so many days left. There are going to be debates. There are going to be issues that will arise. There could be, as Eitan Edwards has predicted, a terrorist attack here in this country, or one that is targeted at Americans that could impact the election. And so there's so many variables and so many factors and so many unknowns. But we have to continue to do what we do, getting the message out. Brother Michael, I am honored. I follow you and I followed you as well to have you on today. Hopefully you'll come back with us. You have educated us. And to our family, our viewers, who aren't our viewers, they're our family members, you continue to inform and educate us as much as we hope that we inform and educate you. And Brother Michael, when you are giving your lessons on Christopher Columbus and colonialism, please note that beginning in the late 15th century, going into the early 16th century, the colonialists led by Christopher Columbus murdered and eradicated 90% of the indigenous population in the Western Hemisphere. Think about that. 90% of the indigenous people were killed by colonialists led by Christopher Columbus. And on that note, and let me congratulate the women's basketball team. We were on today. I DVR'd it, so I'll watch it after we get off. They won by 1 point. They beat France by only 1 point to win their 8th consecutive gold medal and 61st straight game. And this was the toughest of them all. So respect to France, men and women. Y'all brought it, but the United States prevailed. And so what a great Olympics. You know, it was truly, you know, I wish I was in Paris, but for those that were there, I'm sure they enjoyed it. A remarkable Olympics. And, you know, kudos to the city of Paris and all those who helped organize and lead and run the 2024 Summer Olympics. And lastly, Brother Michael, you are in Detroit. I want to say, my dear brother Rob Parker, we talk about entrepreneurship. We talk about Black economic empowerment. My brother Rob Parker founded the first all-Black sports radio station in the nation right there in Detroit. Sports Rap Radio. Rob, who has been my dear friend and brother for decades, you know, remarkable job. But you will be hearing Bobby Charles and me on Sports Rap Radio soon. Okay. We will be doing shows on Sports Rap Radio, so we will certainly reach out to you, Michael, so you can listen to us.
Okay.
And so, again, man, very, very near and dear, Detroit, to me, and keep doing what you do. And with that being said,
thank you.
In the words of the immortal Bob Slade, get your mind right and keep a good thought. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, take care. All right, thank you, Brother Michael. Thank you, team, Jamie, Sabrina, Larry, and our cousins. Have a great Sunday, okay?
Peace. All right, peace. To visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Sundays is Black resistance movements from Christopher Columbus to the Haitian Revolution and the Black Power movement, 1492 to 1968. This is a 10-week online course. And we go through and look at history leading up to the Civil War. We look at hundreds of years of history, and we look at what happens to us after slavery ends. And we look at the Jim Crow era, Reconstruction, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power movement, Great Migration, and look at history, look at the laws and policies put in place that brought us to where we are today to understand where we need to go from here. Okay. And then the first class that I teach, and I teach this one on Saturdays, is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Now, this class we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 12-week online course. For both of these classes, we do the sessions live. All the classes are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. I have my class lesson plan here. So it walks you through each the topics for each class. You can each class session. You can download the class lesson plan here also. Okay. So the classes are on sale right now, $80, regularly $130. We have a bundle pack where you get both courses for $120. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content now. Okay. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content now. You don't have to be present in class. You can just watch it at your own pace. And even after the course is over with, you can go back and you'll still have full access. You can watch it anytime. The content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children. It's not, I don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. It's not overly vulgar. It's very visual. There are 80 to 100 articles that we go through and look at. There are over 200 slides in my class. There are 15 book references as well. And usually I show you the books on the screen, the book references on the screen. Also, I show you excerpts of interviews I've done with some of our scholars like Professor James Small, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, Anthony Browder, Tony Browder, Renoku Rashidi, and others. Okay. So I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade. I developed both of these classes. I'm a historian. I've been studying 34 years. So you're never going to look at history the same way. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So this information is going to totally blow you away. You can support us also through, so register for the classes. That supports us, that helps us to financially support us, to help us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay the bills, etc. You can also support us through Cash App and PayPal, because all this stuff does not happen for free. You can support us through Cash App or PayPal, $, the AHN show through Cash App, $, the AHN show through Cash App. And that's our official Cash App account. Now, these are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts. I've identified 5 of them out here. They've been stealing money from us. I'm still trying to get them shut down. When you click on this link here, it takes you to our QR code for the African History Network as well for Cash App. Okay. And then here's our PayPal link right above that. You can click on that also. So if you want to support us, $5, $10, $15, $25, $50, $100 or more, that definitely helps. Okay. Because it takes a lot to do the type of research that I do and pay for all of these services. Listen to the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, normally 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We did it today earlier. We'll do a rebroadcast at 9 p.m. today. I did 4 hours of radio and Facebook Live with WBLS today, Brother Fatim Muhammad, Open Lines. We did that 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today, okay? 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Facebook Live is on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. So I shared it there. And we talked about the election, Kamala Harris versus Trump. We got into a deep discussion about politics and history, things of that nature. So go check that out also. All right. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my personal page, Michael Imhotep. You can like our posts, share them, post your comments as well as on our videos, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, on YouTube. Okay. And subscribe there, like our posts, comment as well. All right. Look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. Watch me Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Hopefully he'll stop interrupting me. And hopefully on his Win with Black Men call, he'll get some Sigmas on there. I've been telling Roland, you got to get some Sigmas on there. Okay, Blue Fire, Go Mob. Right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.